Welcome to Onourshelf. Today what I have is a full review of the iPhone 6. So after spending a couple of weeks with this phone, I gathered up quite a bit of information and I want to tell you about it. So we'll start off by talking about design and feel. So since 2007, we have had 5 entirely different designs of iPhones, and here we are in 2014, and these are what we have now. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. So right here we have the iPhone 6, and it is completely redesigned. On the right hand side we have our sleep wake button. Below that we have our nano SIM card tray. On top, for the first time in the history of iPhones, there is absolutely nothing, not one button. On the left hand side we have our silent ring switch. Below that, volume up and down buttons. On the bottom we have our headphone jack, microphone, lightning port, and speaker. On the back you have your 8 megapixel camera. Next to that you have a microphone, and next to that you have a True Tone flash. Below that you have your Apple logo. And these lines you see along the top, bottom, and sides are antenna bands, and they kind of remind me of this phone right here. Just saying. Now on the front of the phone up top, you have your earpiece, a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera, an ambient light sensor, and a proximity sensor. And on the bottom we have our sapphire crystal home touch ID button. So overall it's a great super thin design. How thin is it, by the way? 6.9 millimeters. However, I will say when I first saw pictures of this phone online, when I first saw it at the press conference, I wasn't extremely impressed by the design, and I still don't think it's the best looking iPhone made to this date. But after playing with it for a few weeks and taking it out every day, the design has really started to grow on me. And you really start to appreciate the craftsmanship that went into this phone. But on a side note, this is one of the slipperiest phones that I have ever held without a case. So do yourself a favor and please get a case right away, because this phone is pretty slippery and a lot of it has to do with those curved edges. So it looks good and feels good, but how does it perform? Well, in terms of specs, we have Apple's dual-core 1.4 GHz A8 64-bit CPU with 1 GB of RAM. And I believe Apple says this phone is going to be about 20% faster than the previous phone. And how does that translate to real-world performance? Well, it's kind of hard to tell because the iPhone 5S was an extremely fast phone as it is, so that 20 to 25% boost in performance that they claim is there was really hard to notice. However, Touch ID seemed to work a little bit faster, and when multitasking and navigating through apps, it worked really seamlessly, no lag at all, with the exception of a few hiccups every now and then, but you'll pretty much experience that with any phone. No OS on any phone, or any computer for that matter, runs perfectly no matter how good the chipset is. But browsing through iOS 8 on this phone so far has been a pretty enjoyable experience, with the exception of a few optimization issues, such as this. Sometimes my keyboard would be in the wrong spot, and sometimes this volume icon would just stay there, would not go away unless I put the phone to sleep and wake it back up. And I'm sure most of those will be fixed or have already been fixed by the time you watch this video. But other than those few little glitches, this phone screams performance. And while playing some pretty intense games, I experienced very little frame rate issues.
You watch YouTube too much. That cleared my sinuses. Oh, the pain!
And just on a side note, I've already gotten rid of my point and shoot camera. In fact, this is my point and shoot camera, my iPhone or either my Samsung Galaxy S5. But now, in my opinion, these two are on the endangered list, especially when it comes to the iPhone 6 Plus, but I'll talk more about that in my review of the iPhone 6 Plus. But the only thing that's keeping me away from getting rid of these two are the actual physical buttons on the handheld devices themselves. I haven't seen any type of adapter or controller that's good enough just yet. There might be one out there. If you know of one, let me know please. I'll definitely review it and try it out, but I haven't seen one just yet. But if they can get the right controller squared away and some of these exclusive titles, these things might be gone for good. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because exclusive titles, That's really the key here. Now, as far as the display goes, it has a beautiful 4.7-inch diagonal LED backlit widescreen display with IPS technology with a contrast ratio of 1400:1. The pixel resolution is 1334 by 750 at 326 ppi pixels per inch. So on paper, it takes 720p display, not a 1080p display, which is pretty disappointing, especially in 2014 where phones now have 1080p displays. But nonetheless, it's a great looking display. It's extremely bright, the colors really pop out at you, and even when viewing this phone from outside in broad daylight at even odd angles, it's not an issue at all. Text and all type of fonts look really crisp, so if you use your phone for an e-reader quite a bit, especially with the screen now being larger, it makes for a much more enjoyable experience. But the display combined with a very balanced mono speaker, it's a pretty good speaker. It's not like the HTC One M8 speakers, but it's very balanced. It's a decent sounding speaker, but the display quality definitely outshines the sound quality.
Is not moving while you're filming in 4K, because then it's not so good. Now, as for photo quality, I'm gonna go ahead and go with the iPhone 5S for photos.
Now, as for the cameras, we have a rear 8 megapixel iSight camera with up to 1.5 microns and an aperture of f2.2, and that's gonna be good for a 1080p video recording at 30 or 60 frames per second. Also, slow motion video recording at 120 or 240 frames per second. And thanks to an all-new sensor, it has an even faster autofocus. Here are some sample pictures and videos. So overall, it takes great photos and video. Still could use some better low light enhancements, but the camera focuses extremely fast. No colors are really overexposed. Everything's pretty much balanced. So this is definitely my point and shoot camera that I use every day. It's one of the best camera phones on the market. Despite not having the largest amount of megapixels, it still does what it does really well, and that cannot be denied. As far as battery life goes, it has an 1800 milliamp built-in rechargeable lithium-ion battery, which is 300 more milliamps than the iPhone 5S. Apple claims you're gonna get up to 14 hours of talk time on 3G, 10 days of standby time, 10 hours of internet use on 3G or LTE, up to 11 hours on Wi-Fi, also up to 11 hours of video playback, and up to 50 hours of audio playback. And to sum those numbers up with a real world perspective, it's just enough to get you through a full day with average use, which is probably enough for most people. For me, it was not. I found myself having to charge this phone twice throughout the day, 2 full charges to get myself through the day. And it takes right around 2 hours to charge to 100% from zero. Now, and the last thing to touch on is, of course, call quality. And from my experience using AT&T in the Chicago area, call quality has been great. Connect times have been fast and not really any noise in the backgrounds at all on either end. And as long as I had adequate reception, no one had any problems hearing me at all. So in conclusion, instead of it being a smaller iPhone 6 Plus, it's more like a bigger iPhone 5S. Battery life really isn't any better than the iPhone 5S. Still no optical image stabilization, particularly in the iPhone 6. The iPhone 6 Plus does have it, and no 4K video recording. And you probably wanted me to say that the camera lens sticks out from the body, but that's not even close to an issue. I actually think it looks kind of cool. On the bright side, we now have NFC for Apple Pay. It has an extremely fast autofocus on the iSight camera. It's a great looking design. It has an improved keyboard. It even allows for third-party keyboards now. And overall performance, whether you're gaming or multitasking, is extremely fast. So at the end of the day, it's the iPhone, with record-breaking sales in the year 2014, and a market flooded with more smartphones than ever. I think that's the conclusion right there. Take care. I'll see you guys in our next video, and thanks for watching.